Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Aaliyah Burke, and I'm with UMBC Recreation. I'm the Assistant Director of Fitness and Wellness. And today we have Adam Sachs, who is our UMBC dietitian from Chartwells, joining us to talk about macros, what macros are, and we'll have a little overview, and then we'll have a question and answer time at the end of the session. If you think of a question, go ahead and drop it in the chat, and we will add it at the end of we'll ask Adam. I'll read it off to him at the end of the program, or you can save it and do it when we have our question and answer session. So again, thank you all for joining us. We are recording this so we can post it on our Instagram and our YouTube pages. If you're not already following us, please do. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Adam. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Good morning, everyone. Like Aaliyah had mentioned, I'm the campus dietitian, so I do offer services throughout campus to any student, staff, or faculty member. And that includes individual meetings. They're being done virtually this year for now, for the time being anyway. And I've posted my contact info in the chat, so you can just scroll up and see that. But I'm going to get started. Again, really short, brief presentation, then we'll do some question and answer. All right, so I'm going to share just a quick resource. All right, so macros, basically shorthand for macronutrients. And what that means in kind of, nutrition terms, basically it is a nutrient that provides calories. So macronutrients are going to be your carbs, protein, and fat. Micronutrients, on the other hand, do not provide calories. Most of those are basically your vitamins and minerals. So macro is going to, basically anything that provides calories is going to fit into one of these three categories. Technically, alcohol is a macronutrient, but it doesn't really offer nutrients, any nutrients in it. So I don't really include that in the main three, and it doesn't really have functions within the body. So it's technically, by definition, it works, but it's not really included in terms of macronutrients for nutrition. So with the three major macronutrients, so carbs, protein, and fat. So we have, each one is going to provide a different function. It's going to provide a function for when you're eating it, but also when it gets kind of stored in your body, it's going to provide a different function. So I'll kind of go over both of those briefly. Hold on. All right, there we go. Oops. Okay. So we'll start with carbs. And so basic functions for those, the most kind of common function is going to provide quick energy. That's what your body wants to break down first. That's the easiest kind of chemical compound for your body to break down and turn into usable energy for your muscle cells, any type of cell. Basically, this is going to provide, especially for workouts and stuff, this is where you're getting most of your energy from. So also it's major component for your brain fuel. So initially, any carbs you eat, your body's going to convert that into glucose, which is just a different type of simple carbohydrate. It's going to do that. Basically, that's what your brain eats. Its preferred kind of form of nutrients is glucose, is carbohydrates. A lot of times if you haven't had enough or you're kind of feeling lightheaded or stuff, it's most likely because you haven't eaten enough and you haven't eaten enough carbs. So that's what your brain feeds off of. That's what it wants most often. And that's what it's easiest to be able to kind of consume. Some other functions. Regulates blood sugar, regulates body water, so kind of fluid balance a little bit. Carbohydrate molecules can really attach them or can kind of cling on to water molecules, so they can control fluid balance depending on where they're stored in the body, where they're stored in the GI system. They also kind of transport a bunch of other nutrients. They can transport some vitamins and minerals. They can transport or they can trigger some enzymes to kind of work throughout the body. So especially with digestion, your mouth actually has sensors for carbohydrates. So it's the first point where your body can realize that it's being, that you're eating something. So your mouth doesn't have sensors for proteins or fats. It does have sensors for carbohydrates. So as soon as you eat something with carbohydrates, your body recognizes that as, okay, we're eating something, time to start the digestion process. And that again starts in your mouth. So your mouth can recognize the carbohydrates. And that causes a lot of digestive enzymes to get released, and that can really be indicative of how your body's going to digest certain foods, what it has to do in order to absorb those nutrients. So this all starts with kind of consuming carbs is what triggers those enzymes to get released. So that being said, carbohydrate intake can really affect how your digestion works. It can really affect how your metabolism works. Because if your body's not, recognizing it's getting food right away, the metabolism is kind of playing catch up. So carbohydrates definitely can really regulate your metabolism. So if you're too low for too long or even too high, it can cause metabolic shifts. Another big thing, it promotes gut health. So we think of carbohydrates as, a lot of people think of it as the simple carbohydrates is what comes to mind first. So your bread, your juice, your fruit, your pasta, things like that. But there's also complex carbohydrates, so things with really high fiber. And those are only, they're just basically longer chains of carbohydrate molecules, but there's nothing else, in there for what fiber is made out of. But those are really, really beneficial to our health. Fiber really promotes gut health. It can lower cholesterol. When it gets broken down in the GI system, it actually creates kind of cancer-fighting molecules, but that only is coming again from the fiber. So you need to eat carbs to get those types of fibers. And let's see. So some examples. Already kind of listed a few, but your fruits and your vegetables, even though it's mostly those fibers are in those vegetables, still a carbohydrate. Obviously, your simpler carbohydrates like sugar, honey, fruit juices, fruit, any grains, corn, rice, wheat, rye, etc. All those. Potatoes, beans and legumes. Beans and legumes are kind of a good combination of a carbohydrate and protein, so I'll talk about that a little bit next. But all those, are counted as your good carb sources. There's a variety of different kinds. Again, all the way from your simplest, like your sugars, which are very easy to digest, very high calorie, to your high fiber foods like your whole grains, like your legumes. So moving to protein. Major function with protein is anything to do with building, protecting, or growing body tissues. So whether, when you're eating protein, your body's going to break down that protein into its building blocks and use it to rebuild certain areas, any tissues, any damage, or just kind of grow any sort of cells to make them stronger if it needs more of those cells for whatever reason. So most people think of muscle growth, and that is, kind of the easiest example for what your protein in your diet is doing. Because your muscle cells are the biggest concentration of protein. So obviously when you're eating protein, that's kind of where a lot of it's going towards those muscle cells. But really protein is used to build any type of cell in the body. So you're just kind of breaking that down when you're eating it, it's turning into those building blocks. It gets used to all kinds of tissues, all kinds of structures in the body. One other thing is protein. So your genetic material and your enzymes are made up of predominantly proteins. So what like genes are, for example, are just kind of groupings of different proteins that perform a function with the genetic parts of the cells. So proteins play a big factor in that. They play a big factor in how those genes are expressed. So you need proteins for that. You need certain building blocks of proteins to make sure those genes are built correctly. And then enzymes, basically, they will kind of facilitate any chemical process in the body, whether it's speeding it up, slowing it down, changing it in one way, shape, or form. Enzymes are basically, again, different types of proteins kind of built up into a certain structure, so they perform a certain function. Proteins are a big part of the immune response. One, because different proteins are released when you have different immune responses. So it's a big indicator for doctors to find kind of indications of diseases or indications of certain inflammatory processes. But also a lot of your immune cells, so your white blood cells and other things like that, are made up of predominantly proteins. And one other thing is it really helps with fluid balance and pH. So when you're not getting enough protein, it can cause fluid to kind of leak in and out of cells, which is something, you don't really want to, you don't want to have, but it's not, it can cause some imbalances. You're necessarily not going to, those cells aren't going to function properly if they're kind of leaching out fluid. So proper protein is making sure those cells stay, well-formed, not leaking any sort of fluids or anything like that. And also pH, kind of similar with the fluid balance. If fluid is going where it shouldn't, the pH of your body is going to be off as well. Some examples, your eggs, low-fat dairy is a great source of protein. Any of your soy products, soy derivatives, tofu, tempeh, things like that. Obviously, any of your animal meats, beef, pork, poultry, fish, shellfish, some other your plant-based proteins, nuts and seeds, and then some grains like quinoa is a great plant-based protein. Again, like I had mentioned, your beans and legumes are also kind of in that category as well, being a really high protein source. Last category, your fats. So major functions of fats, long-term energy storage. So if you have excess carbohydrates, those get converted into fat molecules, specifically something called triglycerides, which are then stored in fat cells. So long-term energy storage. So these kind of energy storage fat molecules are hard to break down, but they provide a ton of energy once they are broken down. So that's just your body's way of kind of long-term storage, but they can be used in especially, your really long exercise sessions, or, people who are running marathons or doing very long bike races, things like that. You really start to get into the fat metabolism of that. Biggest function of fats, I would say, is transporting hormones. So, this is obviously hormones are kind of controlling tons of bodily functions. They are soluble in fats, which means they only kind of cling to fat cells. They don't get transported by water components. So they have to cling to fat molecules, and then they're transported by those fat molecules around the body. There are also certain vitamins and minerals that can only be transported by fat. For example, vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K, and vitamin E, I think is what I meant. So those four are your major fat soluble vitamins. Those can only be transported by fat. They're only stored in fat. So if you're not getting enough fat in your diet, you can actually be deficient in some of those minerals, or vitamins and minerals. And then another big thing is they support brain function. So a lot of your omega fatty acids are technically fat molecules. They're part of the structure that kind of coats the nerve cells and brain cells. So it's a protective barrier, but it also kind of insulates and kind of controls that conductivity of your nerve impulses. Those are all supported by different types of fats. So your brain definitely really uses a lot of different types of fats to make sure it's functioning properly, to make sure it has the right protection over those nerve cells. And then insulates and protects organs. So all of our organs usually have some sort of membrane with a layer of fat. It helps maintain temperature, helps insulate, again, those vital organs. All will have a small layer of fat around them. And this is just for protection. Some of your food examples, again, your higher fat dairy obviously has some fat. Eggs, animal fats, so any from your animal proteins. Oils, nuts and seeds, fatty fish. Avocado and coconuts are probably your two kind of more plant-based fats that are common. But most of your fats are, again, coming from either those oils or either those animal fats. All right. Let's see. So that's pretty much it. I will also, if anyone wants the handout, feel free to just say something in the chat, or drop me an email, or you can email Aaliyah or anyone from Recreation, and I can send it along. But now we're going to open it up for Q&A.
Hi, this is Sonia. A question related to the percentage of macronutrients. I've seen in different places where there's like you should have a certain percent of carbs, et cetera, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about that, and if it's contingent upon anything like your weight, your height, et cetera?
Absolutely. So the kind of recommended, and this is, again, very generalized for trying to fit as much of the population possible, but the recommended percentages are about 50 to 65% carbs, about 20 to 30% protein, and about 15 to 30% fat. And kind of, so there's ranges for everything in this kind of mix and match. And those are the, nutrition guidelines that the USDA and FDA put out, and that's kind of well accepted by most of the scientific medical community. Now, there are adjustments that you can make to that. So for example, people with type 2 diabetes, they might have closer to like 40 to 50% carbs instead of above 50. There's also certain medical conditions mean you can't have too much fat. So those you would adjust the fat down to maybe, 15%. But again, those ranges are there because once you start getting either above or below those ranges, it can cause issues with bodily functions. So like I mentioned with the carbs, if they're too much lower than that 50%, you're going to start to feel it, whether it's because you feel kind of that mental fog, you feel a little groggy, or you're just not getting energy. Same thing with the fat. If fat's too low, again, you could be at risk for those deficiencies of minerals. I think a lot of the diet trends are kind of really pushing the limits to some of those percentages. For example, like keto diet, really adjust those percentages. Fat is way up, carbs are way down. So those are very, very extreme. And I think, long term, those can have some issues with your metabolism. They can affect your metabolism in kind of a negative way to the point where either you have to be eating keto for the rest of your life, or your body has a hard time adjusting if you try to go back to normal. So kind of sticking within those ranges is what you want to aim for. And I know, a lot of people, especially now, a lot of the low carb diets are kind of coming out. What's considered like medically or scientifically low carb is about 40 to 50% of your diet coming from carbs, which to a lot of people seems like a crazy amount. First off the bat, it's not actually that much. Like most people are probably close to 40 or 50% without even thinking about it. Because there's carbs in a lot of different stuff that you may not realize, but most people are probably close to that 40, 50%. But also, 40 or 50% would be considered a low carb diet, when we're talking kind of the safe scientific way to go about a low carb diet. Whereas some of the diet industry kind of considers a low carb diet to be, below 20%, which is very, very low. So that's where those percentages, you could want to tweak them a little bit, and some people, again, this is more based off if you have, a certain medical condition, or, some people, especially if they have too high fat, if you have like acid reflux or something like that, it can be affected. But, so in those scenarios, yes, you want to adjust those percents, but you want to stay relatively within those ranges just on a regular basis if you can.
Thank you. And I know that Fitness Pal uses, or you can track macronutrients.
Right.
Is that an app that you suggest, or maybe are there other ones?
So I like that one. As far as, and there's a bunch of apps that do a very similar thing. So I like my Fitness Pal a lot. The only thing I would say about it, and this is, I know, one of the main features, so it's hard to say, like, when you link the exercise to MyFitnessPal, it doesn't quite do the math accurately. Even though, yeah, you're entering in your height and weight and everything. I think when you link your exercise and it starts to subtract calories or add the amount of calories you can have in a day, I think it doesn't quite do that math correctly. So I would, what I usually recommend for people who use that is unlink the exercise and then do your normal macro distribution. But then give yourself, a range. Like if you exercise, know that you can, if you're above your range for the day, that's fine because you exercised. So in that aspect, I think it's a really good calculator in terms of if you're just calculating food in, macros of those foods, it does a really good job with that. But when you start to add the exercise in there, it muddies up the math a little bit. But in general, for just macro calculating, looking at those percentages, I think it can be very helpful.
Great. Thank you, Adam.
Hi, this is Carmel. There's so much about protein now, like to get more protein, eat more protein bars, but
Right.
I think most of us probably don't need them unless we're really bodybuilders, and I don't think half of us on the screen are bodybuilders.
Right.
So is that a go-to snack, or what is a good go-to snack?
So with the protein, I think, and this again has kind of gotten twisted a little bit by certain markets, certain industries. Your body can only absorb so much protein in a given sitting. So, for example, it tops out about 25 to 35 grams in a sitting in like a digestive cycle. So let's just say per meal. And this is even, your Olympic level athletes, their body, it's like a human upper limit of you can only absorb so many grams in a given sitting. So this, holds true for just about everyone. You want to aim for that amount of protein per meal. And if you go over that, it's not really benefiting you anymore. Now, if you, are buying supplements like protein bars or protein shakes, obviously they want you to buy more, so they might tell you to have more than that. But in reality, they know that to see results, you only need about that 25 to 35 grams per meal. So if you look at the serving size, a lot of protein bars, a lot of protein shakes are about 20 to 25 grams of protein per serving. Now, they might tell you to put 2 scoops in or have, the whole bar when it's, double what you need. That just makes you buy more. But you don't necessarily need any more than that. Now, if you're exercising more, what people do, say, for example, like you said, bodybuilders, they're only going to have 25 or 35 grams in a sitting, but they're going to space that out perfectly so they have that 6 times a day. Whereas the average person only needs it 3, maybe 4 times a day of those, sittings of a good amount of protein. So for, in terms of snacks, for whether it's getting a good protein source, post-workout, things like that, you don't necessarily need the supplements. I would say for a snack size, you want to aim for at least 10 to 15 grams of protein, whereas in a meal size, you want to aim probably above 20, 25. So for example, just off the top of my head, a 8-ounce glass of low-fat milk is about 12 grams of protein. A hard-boiled egg is about 8 grams. So 2 of those would be about 15 grams. Your like string cheese, each one of those about the same as an egg, 7 or 8 grams per string cheese. So again, that would be a good snack. Have that maybe with a piece of fruit. But you don't necessarily need the protein bars, protein shakes, or anything. Like you said, like you mentioned, a lot of times for the average person who works out a couple times a week, those might be too much protein for a given sitting. And you're just getting extra calories at that point. So you don't necessarily need it. I think they can be helpful sometimes. And the more balanced ones, I think, are obviously ones you want to aim for. So ones that do have a little bit of carbs and fat in there as well. But I think they can help be, because they're about a like meal size in terms of protein, but they're like a snack size in terms of calories. So they can be helpful if, you're on the run or you don't have time to cook a full meal after you work out or something like that. They can be helpful, but I don't think it should be an everyday thing unless you're really, working out every single day and you really need the extra protein, the extra calories. I think it can be a useful tool to kind of supplement your regular diet, but definitely doesn't need to be in every time you work out or every snack for every day kind of thing.
So what do you suggest for snacks? The afternoons, like you're getting tired at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What do you take? What do you eat?
So one thing with snacks, I feel like a lot of people's snacks ends up being high carb, which does help because it's quick energy, right? So it might make you feel good for half an hour or so, but then your body's going to digest it very quickly. That is one issue with carbs, is our bodies digest them very quickly compared to protein and fat. So then you might be hungry, in a half an hour later, or you might kind of feel tired again a half an hour later. So my big thing with snacks is have a combination of different types of food. And it could be small servings of each. So for example, have like a handful of nuts and a piece of fruit, or have some crackers with a sliced cheese. So combinations of different nutrients is a big thing. So get like a carb and a protein, or a protein and a fat, or a fat and a carb. Getting your fruits and veggies in is always helpful. So I think that's snacks are a good way to do that. So have veggies and dip, hummus, guacamole, even just salad dressing. Have fruit and cheese. Have fruit and nuts. Because a lot of people aren't quite getting in their servings of fruit and vegetables every day necessarily. So snacks are a good time to grab some of those servings. But again, pair it with different types of food. And that's going to kind of, one, it slows down your digestion. So you're not going to go through, say it's a carb, you're not going to burn through that right away if it's paired with something else. And you're going to, have a little bit more sustained energy. And that'll kind of should last you until your next meal. So the big thing is, the type or the food doesn't really matter too much, but having different types of nutrients, I would say, is what you want to aim for.
Hi, this is Vlad. I'm wondering what are some alternatives to lactose dairy if one's staying or prefers not to eat that?
Yeah. I know a lot of people actually are lactose intolerant. So yes, it's, cow dairy is a good source of protein, but soy milk and soy products are almost identical in terms of protein. So, doing soy milk instead of regular cow's milk, or soy yogurt is even a good choice. The one thing with a lot of the alternative milks is just, if you're getting it say you're getting it to try and get an extra protein source in, soy milk is the closest by a long shot. So it's the closest to regular milk by far. So a lot of your like nut milks or oat milk or rice milk or anything like that, there's not a lot to them nutritionally. So they might have maybe a gram or two of protein, whereas soy milk has 8 to 10 grams per serving and regular milk has about 10 grams as well. So soy is, definitely the closest by a long shot. They're starting to come out with different kind of blends for your alternative milk. So I've seen it's like almond oats with pea protein, where obviously the protein's much higher. So you can look for those. Those are also a good choice, say if you're getting it for the purpose of getting a protein source. But some of the blends can be kind of pricey, whereas soy milk is almost the same price as regular milk, relatively inexpensive. But that is your closest kind of alternative to milk in terms of if you're lactose intolerant or if you have an allergy. That would, I would say, would be your best bet. And that could go, same can hold true for like the protein supplements. So instead of a whey protein bar shake, get a soy protein bar shake.
Are there any additional questions? Thank you, Adam. That was very great information to kind of help us when we're looking at what we should be eating throughout the day. Again, if you would like a copy of his macro sheet, please email either myself or Adam, and we'll be happy to get that sent to you. I just want to let you know, we have another workshop coming up on Tuesday, November 10th at 3 p.m. It's Smart Eating for the holidays. So we have holidays coming up, even though they probably look a little different this year. We definitely want to focus on making the best of those, of what we're eating during the holidays. So make sure you mark that on your calendar. It's in my UMBC. And again, if you aren't following us already, please follow us on at UMBC Rec on Instagram. And we do have a YouTube channel as well. Again, Adam, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.